Good afternoon, everybody. This is a live emergency briefing as we have a threat of fast-moving supercells, including tornadoes tomorrow across the eastern Carolinas into southeastern Virginia. It's going to be a very dynamic system with a low-level jet increasing above 70 knots, extreme low-level shear, fast-moving supercells, pretty classic eastern U.S. shear profiles for these types of outbreaks happening. And again, I'm going to be targeting just to the east of the Greensboro area, probably near Raleigh as well will be included in that risk. Northeastern North Carolina into southeastern Virginia. And this is the target area I have drawn out here. You can see I have the Christmas colors with the green header and the red target area, of course. And really this region right here, eastern North Carolina into southeastern Virginia, is going to be the most favorable area. Surface winds in the northern half of this risk are going to be a little bit more backed. That's going to increase the wind shear available for those fast-moving supercells to produce tornadoes. My plan is to leave very early in the morning from upstate South Carolina, maybe about 3 or 4 in the morning, and head out here to the Raleigh area. Just wait for this track meet of a severe weather event to begin. And we also have an enhanced risk that has been issued by the Storm Prediction Center for the target area. That was just an upgrade as of the day one update earlier this morning. There you can see that enhanced risk, and those tornado probabilities are also upgraded to the 10% area. So a pretty substantial severe weather event expected tomorrow, including the threat of tornadoes. And I'm going to be targeting northeastern North Carolina into southeastern Virginia. But first, we have this slight risk to talk about later on today, and those blizzard warnings that are dominating the upper Midwest and the northern plains. This slight risk across the Gulf Coast is going to be late night tonight through tomorrow morning. That severe weather threat is going to take a while to get going, as that trough still needs to eject overnight tonight. But there is a slight risk across southern Louisiana, that I-10 corridor, including coastal Mississippi, Alabama, all the way into the western Florida panhandle, where that severe weather threat could be arriving early tomorrow morning, right about the time that I'm going to be heading up to the target area. And we've also got those mass amounts of blizzard warnings there on the Radar Omega app in red. There you can see those winter weather alerts there. The red, those are the blizzard warning areas. Minneapolis, St. Paul is going to be dominated by that. Western Minnesota right now has those extreme blizzard conditions. Basically sustained winds exceeding about 35 miles an hour for a 3-hour period, dropping that visibility below a quarter mile frequently during that time window. That's the official definition of blizzard. The definition used to factor in temperature, but now it's mainly visibility, not even snowfall rate really, but heavy snow does need to be falling, and that it doesn't need to be falling, but it can be blowing. You can also get those ground blizzards, but really the visibility needs to be dropped below a quarter mile frequently during that 3-hour period. And I want to show you the storm system that's responsible for all this. Just a monster of an upper level trough. This is at 500 millibars. And right now you can see a couple little vorticity maxima. There's this one out here lifting north. This is responsible for the blizzard conditions right now. This lead vortex that's lifting up through Iowa the middle part of today into early afternoon. But this system right here, the bowling ball along the southern edge of this trough, which right now is positively tilted as of this early afternoon, this bowling ball is going to swing around the southern edge of the trough as it gains a more neutral tilt, even a negative tilt. That's going to excite that monster low-level jet just to the east of the Appalachians, and that's what I'm targeting tomorrow for that tornado threat. But the late arrival of this bowling ball and kind of the gradual arrival of that positive vorticity advection aloft here, that's contributing to the nocturnal severe weather threat along the central Gulf Coast late night tonight. So there's going to be a slow development of that monster low-level jet. It's not going to happen until the morning hours tomorrow, really, and that's because this system has more of a positive tilt with a lead vortex lifting up through the central and northern plains to the upper Midwest, and really this kicker needs to align. The trough needs to gain a more neutral tilt, and once this kicker system starts to eject that second vortex, that's when the severe weather is really going to begin. And you can see that bowling ball of a system start to consolidate there on the backside of the trough. It looks like it's getting this more positive tilt, but really this vortex just to the east of the Four Corners is consolidating, and that's going to help to get this trough more aligned with a more neutral tilt. And here you can see the lead system lifting up through this evening up near Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's why those blizzard conditions are on the backside of that 500 millibar vortex there. But this is the system here on the southern end that we got to watch for that severe weather. And you can see down here in the central Gulf Coast by about 9 or 10 p.m. severe weather is finally going to develop central and southern Louisiana, and that's as that positive vorticity advection begins. You really start to get those low-level height falls to the west. Gradually, you get a low-level jet that forms down there in the central Gulf Coast. But you can see that it's a delayed formation of that low-level jet, kind of veered and a little bit weaker on the southern end where that instability is going to be down there in the central Gulf Coast. And that's even as of about 10 p.m. tonight. But you can really see the low-level jet gain strength out ahead of that lead vortex. But as that southern kicker system rotates around the southern edge of this trough, it gains a more neutral tilt there with time. Through the early morning hours tomorrow, Thursday morning, you could slowly see this trough gain a more neutral tilt just in time to excite that low-level jet to the east of the Appalachians. And this is by the early morning hours on Thursday. You really start to see that kicker system swinging around the south end of this trough, slowly gaining more of a neutral tilt. So you want to look at that trough axis and to really determine the ideal shape of these upper level systems for severe weather. You want them to transition from a positive tilt to a neutral tilt and maybe even to a negative tilt, all during peak heating to really get that maximum low-level jet and to get those shear profiles to match up perfectly. It's not quite going to happen across the north central Gulf Coast late night tonight through tomorrow morning, but it does look like it's going to happen to the east of the Appalachians. You can already start to see the southern edge of this low-level jet start to intensify by about 7 a.m. tomorrow, and starts to intensify down into the north central Gulf Coast. So if there's an active convective line, which there's going to be, moving through the Gulfport to Mobile areas by about 7 a.m. tomorrow, that low-level jet is going to be starting to intensify right at about the same time, about 5 to 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. So there's likely going to be some tornado warnings issued across the north central Gulf Coast by daybreak tomorrow, even some supercell water spouts. That includes the coastal Alabama there into the Florida Panhandle by about 6 to 7, 8 in the morning. And then as that system ejects, that low-level jet is going to fill in here to the east of the Appalachians by tomorrow. And that's as this upper level system is starting to gain that more neutral tilt that we're talking about. That northern vortex does seem to remain relatively dominant up there, but this is the vorticity at the base of the trough is related to that vortex that's just to the east of the Four Corners right now. That's going to swing through the southern edge of this trough, and this trough is going to gain the dreaded negative tilt by midday, afternoon hours tomorrow. New consolidated vortex there over the Corn Belt dominates. Look at this jet streak coming around the base of the trough there at 500 millibars. And all because of the shape of this trough, you're going to get maximum low-level jet formation to the east of the central and southern Appalachians here. That includes northeastern South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, all the way back pretty far too. And there's likely going to be a fast-moving squall line, maybe with embedded tornado threat within that squall line. Clusters of renegade supercells are going to develop in this open warm sector with that big-time low-level jet right there. And look at that, eastern North Carolina. Anytime you see this with the 1 kilometer winds, basically all above 60 knots out there, that's a recipe for big problems, even exceeding 70 knots up there, northeastern North Carolina into southeastern Virginia, all the way down into eastern South Carolina, where there's likely also going to be that severe weather threat. And this is by 6 p.m. tomorrow, that low-level jet still anchored across Carolina Alley there. Still trying to figure out what to call this zone across the Carolina Piedmont up into eastern Virginia, including part of the Delmarva area. Right now I've got it labeled as kind of the Piedmont / Mid-Atlantic Alley, but still trying to figure out a catchy name for this area. But really the storms and the storm systems, the individual storms and the storm chasing terrain all kind of behave similarly within that zone defined here to the east of the Appalachians, including eastern South Carolina, North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, all the way up into the Delmarva area. And I'm wondering too if I should expand that zone just a little bit further north. But now I'm going to take a deeper dive into the blizzard conditions, and then we'll come back to the nocturnal slight risk tonight. There you can see that slight risk, including southern Louisiana, southern Alabama, Mississippi, southern Mississippi as well, all the way into the Florida Panhandle by tomorrow morning. That's a late night tonight, tomorrow morning type of a setup. But right now, we've got blizzard conditions dominating portions of the upper Midwest. There you can see those winter weather advisories too for later on for anticipation of lake effect down here in western lower Michigan. But the red zone out here, these are all blizzard warnings. And visibility is dropping well below a quarter mile out here. Heavy snow bands still hammering this zone from Minneapolis, St. Paul off to the west. I've seen many images across eastern South Dakota too of just incredible blizzard conditions out there. Maximum sustained winds well over 35 miles an hour out here across this area because of that lead vortex that we just showed you. And the blizzard warning conditions include northwestern Iowa as well. Look at some of those snow bands. Not as much snow is falling down here in the Iowa location, but you can see right underneath the core of that vortex. Look at that spin. That's that vorticity maximum that we're talking about. A lot of cold air aloft too, causing the formation of this low top convection out there, almost a cellular nature to that westerly flow on the south side of that vortex. But you can certainly see that vort spinning along in northwestern Iowa there. Some heavy banding on the backside of that band all the way back to the Sioux Falls area. When that band right there was heading through Sioux Falls, that was nasty. There you can see that band moving into northwestern Iowa there, southwestern corner of Minnesota. But when that thing was moving through the Sioux Falls area, visibility dropping substantially, crazy convective snows appeared, big time winds out there, just textbook blizzard conditions that you often get out here. And this is the vortex spinning across northwestern Iowa there. That's bringing all this wind banding to the snow as well. Look at that, even a little bit of warm advection out ahead of it. You can see just some isentropic lift to the leading edge of this vortex. But these bands, basically stationary. You can even see where the pivot is happening here, definitely filling in. Incredible banding happening out here. Blizzard conditions have begun in western Minnesota and spreading east toward eastern Minnesota. Temperatures are plummeting as well into the single digits back behind it. Flash freeze happening, all the buzzwords within this deal, so you definitely don't want to be caught off guard. 7 to 11 inches of snow too happening with the passage of this lead vort. And kind of a double-barreled upper level system too, with that vortex lagging behind just to the east of the Four Corners. That's going to swing around and give this thing more of a negative tilt as that predominant vortex consolidates over the Corn Belt out there. But you can definitely see these dangerous blizzard conditions. Let me show you the surface map and show you some of these textbook blizzard conditions out there. Here you can see the surface map. 4-star snow is where there's heavy snow falling. You can see the number here. That's the wind gusts, gusting well over 30 miles an hour out there. Many locations that are sustained 35 miles an hour or stronger, especially out here in southwestern Minnesota. Gusts well over 40 out there across southwestern Minnesota into eastern South Dakota there. And in eastern South Dakota, even though the snowfall coming out of the sky might subside a little bit, the winds then ramp up, and you've got gusts out to near 50 out there, the open terrain and the rolling hills there of eastern South Dakota. And a lot of heavy snow still falling too. 4-star snow across southwestern Minnesota happening there. You can see the temperatures are plummeting too right now across the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. Temperatures right now in Minneapolis proper, they're in the mid-30s. Heavy snow being reported there, but the temperatures plummeting with that fast freeze, dropping into the teens from the northwest side of Minneapolis, and then the single digits down here across the eastern Dakotas, northwestern Minnesota, and all this very cold, frigid air is surging off to the southeast. And really the temperature gradient between these two zones and that vortex all contributing to those blizzard conditions and those big-time winds on the backside of it as well. Massive blizzard warning, definitely the largest blizzard warning area of the season by far, covering a large portion of eastern Nebraska as well. That blizzard warning area just outside of the Omaha area. But that banding is definitely moving into Omaha with a winter storm warning. Look at all these bands on the backside of that vort, surging in from northwest to southeast. See exactly what Omaha is anticipating in terms of snowfall here. Only the total accumulations of 1 to 2 inches, but those winds gusting up to 55 miles an hour helped to prompt that winter storm warning area. Borderline blizzard too. If there was just a little bit more snow to blow around, you'd probably have blizzard warnings all the way down into the Omaha area. Blizzard conditions just hammering Sioux City right now as well. Sioux City, Vermilion, up towards Sioux Falls, getting blasted by those blizzard conditions. and they extend all the way back to the Missouri River into central South Dakota. Don't let this radar image fool you in Sioux City. Even though it looks like the snow may be subsiding, the wind is still dominating out there. So definitely still some big time blizzard conditions through the night tonight, through tomorrow, and then things should start to subside on Christmas Eve. So now let's go back again to the severe weather event, the Christmas Eve severe weather event. Let's drill down. Well, first we'll look at the Gulf Coast. I want to show you here using the RAP analysis. Destabilization happening across eastern Texas into southwestern Arkansas here. Surface-based instability starting to begin. Little elevated mixed layer that's coming in over top, leading to some breaks in the clouds. But this is a slight risk area here across southern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, into the Florida Panhandle. Stepping forward with time, see how that instability axis right now that's largely diurnal heating related begins to get pinched off there in western Louisiana. But then you can see that coastal front down over the Gulf of Mexico start to drift a little bit closer to the coastline as that modest low-level jet slowly begins to develop. But you can really see just offshore of Beaumont there, just off Sabine Pass, you start to get that nocturnal convection forming at around 9 p.m. After sunset, just to the south of Sabine Pass there. And that's going to come ashore likely to the south or to the southeast of Lake Charles, down near those areas that were hammered by the hurricanes this year, Creole, those types of areas, Cameron Parish down there. You're going to start to see those supercells drift slowly toward shoreline. Probably not actually coming ashore until somewhere to the south of the Lafayette area down there in southern Louisiana. Here you can see the HRRR, 18Z HRRR, agrees with the RAP on the location of that instability axis as of 19Z. And you can see that cape start to build around the Houston area there, 23Z through sunset. And notice how that surface-based instability begins to come ashore there at about 3Z, 9 or 10 p.m. there across southwestern Louisiana, south of I-10. But most of the instability is over the open Gulf of Mexico there at about 10 p.m. There you can see that front surging off to the east. So while a majority of the instability gets pinched off over the open Gulf of Mexico, you can see the northern half of this, about 400, 500, 600 cape, starting to come ashore there to the south of I-10, along I-10 over southern, southeastern Louisiana. Not a lot of cape, so you're just basically going to have one of those convective lines, squall lines with a lot of rain around it, with some embedded tornado warnings, especially as you get closer to 12Z, closer to tomorrow morning. When you get to the western Florida Panhandle, Pensacola area, Mobile, east into the Florida Panhandle will have a chance. But you can definitely see how that instability is pretty minor, but there is some non-zero surface-based instability that tries to come ashore. And the reason why a majority of that cape stays offshore and that coastal front really basically stays offshore as well through the whole entire night is because the tail end of this low-level jet is pretty weak. And that's because this system has a positive tilt and really doesn't gain that negative tilt until a little bit later in its life cycle as it's surging toward the southeastern U.S. And that's why this southwestern portion here of the low-level jet really doesn't start to crank at all. But still, you got a little bit of a hook-shaped photograph there, some positive non-zero storm relative helicity in the lowest 1 to 3 kilometers there. So there is a chance that as this low-level jet slowly increases at about 6, 7, 8 tomorrow morning, that you could start to get some spin-ups within that line. Definitely some marginal thermodynamics, though, even right along the Gulf Coast. The majority of that instability stays well to the south over the open Gulf of Mexico. Kind of a wimpy little elevated mixed layer indicated by this forecast sounding. And make sure that photograph is visible below my head there. But just kind of a marginal photograph, and it doesn't really get marginal until closer to tomorrow morning, closer to sunrise, coastal Alabama, the Florida Panhandle. That's when you start to get a non-zero chance of a tornado threat within that convective line. But it's just going to be a pretty weak convective line with some spin-ups within it, surrounded by a lot of rain, and really that big severe weather event doesn't get going until the eastern Carolinas tomorrow, and that's how we have an enhanced risk out there. Just the instability doesn't quite make it up to this thing. You kind of have a weak tail end of the low-level jet down here, southeastern Louisiana, coastal Mississippi. The models have been showing maybe some renegades developing out there near Mobile Bay by tomorrow morning, but it's just too little too late. you never really get that neutral tilt to the upper level system in time to realize a substantial severe weather threat in the Gulf Coast. Nevertheless, at about 9 p.m., the HRRR agrees with the RAP that you get some convection forming over the open Gulf of Mexico, a bit of a convective line here out ahead of this front, surging off to the southeast. Eventually, the whole front lights up with elevated storms all the way down into central Louisiana. I don't really see much of a tornado threat with this line, at least along the front. Even though these photographs are marginally favorable, the thermodynamics, you start to really lose that instability axis. It gets pinched off as you lose daytime heating, and the wind shear just isn't quite strong enough to cause those storms to try to drill through that shallow, stable air. But it is marginally conducive for a tornado threat here at the tail end of the convective line. You're going to have a convective line that's forming here, the front, a little bit to the west of it, some prefrontal clusters of storms developing in the Sabine Pass convergent zone there, with that weak low-level jet starting to develop. But the weak low-level jet is also pretty parallel to the front that's blasting off to the southeast. So really, this is definitely the night before the day where Christmas Eve, the enhanced risk across the eastern Carolinas looks like the big event. This is by 10 p.m. Central Standard Time tonight. Convective line with a lot of rain around it, socked in with stratiform rain. Maybe some supercells over the open Gulf of Mexico there, well offshore. Could have a little bit more of a favorable thermodynamic profile down there over the open Gulf of Mexico. But still, you just kind of have these marginal photographs, some veer-back veer evident as well. And a lot of that is just because this low-level jet never really gets cranking down there to the east of the front. That's because this upper-level system, the double-barreled upper-level system with that lead vortex lifting up, prompting those blizzard conditions across the upper Midwest, and then the kicker system coming in around the base of the trough, that's going to be what really gets that wind shear aligned across the eastern Carolinas. And thankfully, this line's going to get left behind there, well to the southwest of the Appalachians. So now let's shift our focus to the east of the Apps. This will be by tomorrow morning, about the time that I wake up here. And we can use, I don't like using composite indices, but we'll use the 0 to 1 kilometer EHI to really show you that the Cape is not in position yet by tomorrow morning. But all this Cape that's organizing off the coastline there of the Carolinas is going to spread onshore. You can start to see it spreading onshore, northeastern South Carolina, Cape Fear area by late morning, tomorrow morning. But notice how this instability axis arrives right at about midday too, just in time for peak heating. So you've got a plume of 1,000 plus joules per kilogram surface-based Cape nosing into eastern North Carolina, almost to the Virginia border where the stronger wind shear is located, but plenty of surface-based Cape at least all the way up, nosing up to the Raleigh area by 20Z. It's about 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can see that some evidence here of convection within that Cape axis, southeastern North Carolina, northeastern South Carolina. I'll have to decide whether I play the nose of this instability axis up near the Raleigh area, or do I target kind of the heart of that low-level jet axis down closer to Cape Fear, New Bern area. But look at that. It looks like a majority of this Cape axis stays just offshore, kind of nosing onshore at northeastern South Carolina toward the Cape Fear area there by the time it's too late. But this is definitely going to be a very high shear, relatively skinny Cape type setup. Here's that monster low-level jet happening. Look at that big-time low-level jet. A little bit of a pop in the low-level jet right along the frontal boundary as it exits the Appalachians there. But this is a big low-level jet that stretches all the way down, in fact, into southeastern Georgia, where the shear begins to veer out just a bit. But this is at 21Z. Let's look at the 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity, cut right to the chase. Notice how the greatest helicity ejects off to the northeast, kind of anchored here over northeastern North Carolina into southeastern Virginia. This is at 21Z, 3 p.m. Definitely peak heating. A little bit of a pop in the helicity, too, just to the east of that convective line. A lot of times that'll happen when you're watching these skinny, fast-moving squall lines move. You'll see a big surge in the low-level jet just ahead of it. And that leads to an enhancement, too, in the storm relative helicity. So this convective line that's going to be west of the main target area, keep an eye on that, too, because there could be spin-ups within that convective line as it's surging off to the east. This is at 23Z, northeastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia there. A lot of renegades as well in this environment. Just for fun, we'll pull a spot sounding there. Look at that nasty photograph. Very back to low-level winds, too. And that's key with these meridional storm motions, is they have a lot of low-level winds in the lowest kilometer to have an easterly component. And that's one thing that you've got with this photograph. See how the storm motion is almost due south at 50 knots? You're going to be talking about supercells ripping from south to north throughout this warm sector in eastern North Carolina, northeastern South Carolina, and southeastern Virginia, ripping northeast at 50 knots. Right mover will move just to the right of due north. But look at all this low-level flow here, showing you that low-level flow is very backed. A lot of easterly component low-level flow from about 2 kilometers down to the surface. Relatively weak surface wind there, just shy of 20 knots. 1 kilometer wind, greater than 60 knots. This is a big-time low-level jet. And there's going to be renegade convection happening. Subtle elevated mix layer, just a little bit of a dry pocket coming in there, about 3 to 4 kilometers. Should be just enough to get some breaks in the clouds. But look at this, a lot of speed shear happening. Just a little bit of backing, though, in the low levels, bending that photograph over into this quadrant of the plot. And that leads to a lot of storm relative helicity, a ton of storm relative helicity there. 3, 4, 5 kilometer winds, south-south, basically out of the due south, and that's forcing these meridional storm motions for sure. But if you didn't have these low-level winds 2 kilometers down with an easterly component, you probably wouldn't have a critical angle that's supportive of tornadoes out there. Nevertheless, that critical angle is still marginal for the tornado threat. Let's shift on over here to the composite reflectivity. And this could be a negative factor too. Even though these look like a bunch of renegade supercells by this time, there's a chance that everything will get so socked in so quickly. This is at 20Z. Looks like a supercell coming into there. Cape Fear. Supercells all over the place, ripping to the north at 50 knots out here in the open warm sector, eastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia. Here's that skinny squall line socked in with precipitation. Could even get some embedded tornado warnings with this thing. But it's probably going to be so socked in with precip, there's probably not going to be any clean inflow channels into that line. But out ahead of it, anywhere east of Greensboro, Raleigh, into southeastern Virginia, Richmond, you got to keep an eye on any of these updrafts, because these updrafts are going to be evolving in an environment with a 60 to 70 knot low-level jet. Maybe as early as 18Z, you could even get some surface-based storms out here in the Raleigh area. That would be about midday. But really, after 18Z is when it's really going to start getting interesting. You'll get a lot of these bubbling throughout the day. Probably some nasty supercells just offshore, too. But they'll gradually become more and more surface-based through the day as this nose of instability builds in. By 20Z, by about 3 p.m. Eastern time, you're probably going to have a landfalling waterspout down there near Cape Fear up toward New Bern, ripping northward at 50. And then they do kind of get a little bit disorganized once they come in. So I'll have to decide, do I want to play this mode into northeastern North Carolina, into southeastern Virginia with a little bit stronger shear, not quite as favorable thermodynamics, or do I want to play down here a little closer to Cape Fear, New Bern area? But look at that photograph. So maybe the wind shear is even more favorable down towards southeastern North Carolina, where you get just a little bit more veering of the upper level winds, storm motion just a bit more further right. Still, you retain the backed low-level jet there as well. So this environment down here across southeastern North Carolina looks pretty nasty as well. Supercells, Raleigh, you're going to want to watch out for this thing. Raleigh up toward Richmond, that entire zone. Another supercell. Round after round of supercells hammering Cape Fear, it looks like, throughout the day. And that's why there's an enhanced risk. The HRRR is showing discrete supercellular modes extending 9 or 10 p.m. across southeastern Virginia, eastern North Carolina there. Probably going to have tornado warnings out there, even approaching the Outer Banks. You can see the hints at the lake effect. Looks like I'm starting to lose it here a bit. So there's the target area, covering that entire zone I mentioned. to the east of Greensboro, including northeastern South Carolina. Keep an eye on that. South of that zone, confidence decreases a bit, but even down toward Charleston, you can get some landfalling supercells. But really, this is for those renegades out ahead of the front, southeastern Virginia. I may even extend this up to include the Richmond area as well. This zone right here, and I got to decide whether I'm going to head down to play the Cape Fear, Wilmington area, or do I play the northern end of the zone, northeastern North Carolina into southeastern Virginia. That's going to be the tough decision that I'm going to need to make. And I still need to finish my Christmas shopping. And I'm going to be live streaming as well throughout this event. Very difficult chase that's going to be happening out here. I could even end up in the North Carolina Outer Banks, and I'm doubling back in time to celebrate Christmas here with my mom. And you can see that this front even begins to break up late this evening as it charges east into eastern North Carolina. These will probably even break up into a few tornado warnings as well. Eventually it moves into northeastern North Carolina there by the end of the period. And really, those tornadic storms don't exit the North Carolina Outer Banks. The Renegades maybe by 11 p.m., 10 or 11 p.m., but then this next line reinvigorates as it approaches the Atlantic. The next line surging through eastern North Carolina, eastern Virginia there. In fact, it really intensifies. Tornado outbreak continues over the open Atlantic there offshore. Low-level jet, which is key to producing tornadoes. I tell everybody it's very rare that you get a tornado without at least a 25 knot 850 wind. But out here with such a dynamic system, 70 knot low-level jet, even up to 75 knots out here in the Outer Banks, you're going to be able to look up at the sky and just see those low clouds ripping from south to north, moving so fast it'll almost look like the sky before a hurricane out there. But pretty incredible conditions out there with this low-level jet, 75 knot low-level winds. Look at this stretched out photograph in the Outer Banks late. So the photographs get a little bit less favorable with time there as well. Let's go back to the surface map here. Rochester, you're still at 43 degrees. Flash freeze beginning though, down to 26 there in Minneapolis. Due north wind over 30 knots, gusty, heavy snow. So really the southeastern side of Minneapolis, you're flirting with temperatures just above freezing. Northwest side, temperatures plummeting, heavy snow coming down, banding, winds ramp up. So it's definitely an exciting but dangerous time this Christmas Eve out here in central southwestern Minnesota, Minneapolis area with that blizzard warning happening. Tomorrow is going to be a very dangerous day across eastern North Carolina. And I'll be chasing it. There you can see that low-level jet sliding off the shoreline. I think this is going to be mainly a noon to 5 p.m. type of an event out there. And really this strong flow well out ahead of that front. It's going to be the key. Winds at 700 are also very stout, a little bit stronger, closer to that front. But this will probably be the time that I'll be on a tornado between about 25 and 27 Z, maybe 28 or 25 and 28 hours. Probably be between about 20, 23 Z out here. Trying to see if I can answer will come to me if I can see any reason to target northeastern North Carolina as opposed to Cape Fear area. The photographs actually looked a little bit better down south. But these winds back nicely, surface winds back nicely in northeastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia. Surface low lifts off to the northeast. That would lean toward targeting the northern end of that. Let's see what the upper level winds look like. The only reason why I might target a little bit further south is because the upper level winds get a little bit more veered. You get a slightly more westerly component on the southern edge of this line. That could push those storm motions just a little bit east of due south to north. That happens a little bit more so later on in the forecast period. But boy, honestly, this looks like one of those setups where it just looks uniformly favorable for tornadoes throughout the warm sector, throughout eastern North Carolina, almost the entire thing. I'm just going to have to make a last-second decision early at dawn tomorrow whether I want to target this Raleigh area or down toward Cape Fear. Looks like it doesn't get going until about 19Z. Between 19 and 20Z is when this event really starts to get going. See, the dew points are a bit higher down near Cape Fear, but they're also high up here in northeastern North Carolina. Even southeastern Virginia, you have 60 plus dew points. Probably a little bit of mixing down happening too. You know, with that big low-level jet. The dew points are a little bit less in northeastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia, low 60s as opposed to mid 60s. That might be a reason to target the southern mode a bit more so than the northern mode. These are the forecast dew points by the 18Z HRRR, but really the dew points fill in to southeastern Virginia as well by evening. Three-kilometer NAM in agreement with the 18Z 3-kilometer NAM. Definitely seems to be in agreement with the evolution of this low-level jet. Quite strong there at 21Z. Shifting models, trying to look for anything in here. This is one thing. Look at the 3-kilometer NAM, how it retains strong wind shear, raw 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative velocity across northeastern North Carolina and southeastern Virginia, and weakens it a little bit further south, getting a more skinny type of a hodograph down there near Cape Fear, whereas further north, up near the North Carolina-Virginia border, you have a much more broad hodograph with the more backed low-level winds. Very saturated sounding. So this would tell you to play a little bit further north. That's one thing I'm seeing here with a 3-kilometer NAM. Northeastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia. You start to get some skinny hodographs as you get further south across southeastern North Carolina into northeastern South Carolina. So it does appear that that answer is coming to us. We'll see how it changes this evening, tonight, through tomorrow. The real hard part is just going to get visual of these tornadoes as they're moving at 50 knots from south to north. You have to work a good north-south corridor to maintain long visual with the storm, or you just work multiple storms on a west to east corridor and make sure that you time them properly. But definitely a different style of storm chasing out here with these fast-moving supercell storms. Northeastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, possibly all the way down into coastal Carolina, but at least the 3-kilometer NAM is hinting at some more skinny hodographs developing with time, with that veering upper level winds not really arriving until after the frontal passage. So I think you're going to have kind of uniformly meridional storm motions through eastern North Carolina, southeastern Virginia, and even northeastern South Carolina here with this system. So that's what we're looking at with this deal tomorrow. Here's the enhanced risk by the Storm Prediction Center. The enhanced risk clearly favoring the more favorable low-level wind shear that 3-kilometer NAM is showing, and the HRRR is hinting at as well. I'm going to be targeting where that strongest low-level shear is ejecting to, rather than just using composite reflectivity on the HRRR. Here is my target area, a little bit more broad, further west as well, kind of anticipating a pretty uniformly favorable environment for fast-moving tornadic supercells covering a large portion of eastern North Carolina there from Greensboro off to the east. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to my live stream. I hope you all have an incredible Christmas, and I hope you're able to tune in tomorrow to my live streams as I am dominating out there. And anybody in the blizzard warning area, stay tuned to the Radar Omega app for those winter weather alerts. Blizzard warnings dominating the upper Midwest and the eastern portions of the northern plains. And some new winter storm warnings as well for the backside of this frontal passage that's going to come through, with those winter storm warnings along the western slopes of the Appalachians out there. 2 to 4 inches, some heavier amounts across the higher terrain. And that's from 4 p.m. Thursday, so 4 p.m. tomorrow through early morning, Christmas morning. So there could be a white Christmas there, maybe even into northern Georgia where a winter weather advisory is in place. Maybe some sleet and some ice out there could deliver a white Christmas. But definitely some winter weather coming into the western side of the Appalachians, aided by the moisture, upstream moisture here across the Great Lakes. So this is basically an effective lake effect situation with some orographic lift, some vorticity advection as well. On the backside here is lobes of vorticity come around. But a beautiful snowfall out here. General 4 to 6 inches. It's not like the last system where you had this monster surface low just whipping up the spine of the Appalachians. This is more of a post-frontal event. Lake effect returning to northeastern Ohio, northwestern Pennsylvania. Some of these same areas that were hammered by the heavy snowfall, at least a little bit west of there. So a lot of exciting weather to talk about, but some very exciting and potentially dangerous weather to talk about tomorrow across eastern Carolinas into southeastern Virginia. And I'll be in full-blown chase mode tomorrow, so stay tuned. Hope you guys have a great Christmas and never stop chasing.